call to order the scheduled October 25th, 2022 meeting of the Groveland Township Planning Commission. Our pledge of allegiance.
I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Danielle, our roll call, please.
Jeff Penzine,
Present.
Neil Loutland.
Here.
David Leo is excused. Lynn Shank,
Yes, ma'am.
Jenny McKay. Yes. Jim Christopher,
Yes.
Angela Willis. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I have one quick announcement.
Absolutely.
We're going to get some tablets, computers, so that instead of having the staff running off multiple copies of some of the stuff like the big package today, she's going to send it to you in the email and then they'll load it on some tablets out here. So is there anybody who does not have a computer that they bring here, or if they would need the tablet, because we'll get a couple of them if we need them.
I don't bring a
I would-
computer.
So, okay, 2,
I would love it.
3. Okay, we'll get 3 or 4 more good shape.
Like.
Okay. No, we need to eliminate her having, she's got a ton of work to do, so we gotta eliminate her having the Xerox. It's fine.
Want to do this anymore for me?
No.
And it's a.
I love you dearly, but no.
I love it when we get into the meetings. This is great.
We're hiring, we're getting rid of the scribes next week. Thank you.
You're welcome, absolutely. So before we begin, there's a couple of blanks on tonight's agenda for people also in attendance besides Mr. DePalma, of course. We have 2 visitors in the room. Would you please introduce yourself?
My name is Liz Gundon. I'm with Becca and Raider and Leonard there. And I've been working on Groveland's zoning ordinance since Michelle left.
Hey, Liz, thank you for coming, sir.
I'm Kyle Ellis. I'm also with Becca and Raider. I work in the planning group with Liz out of our office. We're working with you all.
Yeah, thank you both for coming tonight. Absolutely. Okay, to tonight's agenda, we begin with approval of the minutes from the last scheduled planning commission meeting held
I
August
make a motion.
23, 2022. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to review those.
Can I make a motion that we approve the minutes of the August 23rd, 22 regular PC meeting?
I second that.
We have discussion. There's just one line.
Correct. I was gonna say.
Good jump all over it.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
sorry.
before we put it up for approval of the motion as stated, any discussion? Angela?
Just where do I jump in? It's only minor, just a typo on my name. The motion was made by Wills. You just need to add an I, that's okay.
I would have never caught it. A billion years.
And
That's it.
that's a great point to that. It does not list me as absent with
Oh.
permission. I was not present at that meeting, Mr. Lachlan.
On this is the agenda is where I put excused.
Right here.
So like on this agenda, it
No.
would say excused.
But what he's saying is the August 23rd meeting.
It wasn't on there.
Yeah,
It wasn't on
the
there.
minutes from
From it,
the
the
August
minutes.
23rd meeting. date.
He wasn't here.
I don't know. I'm not militating in favor of
Oh, I-
noting me as absent.
You don't want to touch it. You just want me to add.
Well, I was not here with, I think it was an excused absence.
Yes.
Correct. So, for what it's worth. Any other comment? Okay, all in favor of adopting the minutes
With the change.
with the changes noted as the motion was stated? In favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carried. Moving along to tonight's agenda, kind of a lighter agenda, which is sort of refreshing in light of recent history. Hopefully everyone's everyone's had a chance to review tonight's agenda. Any thoughts or comments before we put that up for approval? I'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion, we approve today's agenda.
I'll second.
No comment or questions, so those in favor of approval of tonight's agenda as per the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Motion carried. That brings us to the next item, our main item of business tonight. New business, item 10 on the agenda is the Planning Commission initial review of the zoning ordinance draft. I'm happy that Liz and Kyle, you are here tonight. I guess just initially, I want to thank you both for the thoughtful detail put into this. This is I don't know, I guess an ambitious undertaking to you know, kind of restructure and clarify some of the, you know, the historical, maybe attorney speak language of the existing ordinance into a more you know, user-friendly, readable, understandable format. So that's good.
We had a good meeting with Liz and Danielle to go over it. And I think it's in pretty good shape, except for some last changes that we got to Will because we forgot to give it to him before. So he had to do it right away.
Yeah, and so I guess I would just invite some feedback on how to proceed with tonight's you know, discussion. You know, I'm open to suggestions. I had just made some notes, some questions, if you will, for Liz and Kyle. I guess the adoption process document and also the timeline were helpful. Were those were, I guess those are proposals of the both of you, or were those drawn from, you know, some other, was that something that came out of the discussion with Bob and Danielle, or?
Sure. So the first document, the zoning ordinance adoption process, this is straight from the June zoning act. So that's just basically outlining in a more way what the steps are for adoption. It is also still pretty detailed, but and then based on that, I created this adoption timeline because this is sort of to set up this adoption timeline with suggested dates that would align with, you know, with your meeting schedules, with the requirements for, you know, there's public hearing, has to go to open county for review. So there are a lot of steps that has to go. So these dates were, long answer to the question, these dates were sort of just initial suggestions, but they can be modified.
Gotcha. When I reviewed them, they seem to be a little ambitious, but I'm not, you know, maybe that's just my awkward view. You know, I don't know what others' thoughts were, but you know, just with regard to the adoption timeline that's been laid out. And again, thank you for doing that, because you're right, the statutory, you know, regurgitation is kind of generic, if you will. So it's good to have, I'm very linear in my logic, so it's good to have a schedule to keep us on track, and we know that's beneficial also from recent history. But any comments on the proposed timeline before we get going on the, you know, the minutia of the ordinance itself?
Just a detail, the January, February dates are 2023.
Oh,
Yeah. Not 22.
Catch.
That's my error.
The only question I have regarding the timeline is how hard and fast are these dates? Like, for example, I'm getting through the initial review of the draft and basically having I would assume there'd have to be a vote here to say, yeah, as with whatever edits or whatever, it moves forward and then goes into public hearing. How does that, so between step one and step two, is there anything in between we need to be aware of? And also two, is the expectation to have a vote tonight, or is there wiggle room where we may be able to, because I've got some questions, but I think a lot of mine is more related to studying what the current ordinance is and seeing, it would be nice to see exactly what has changed, what's been updated. So I know what's current, so I don't have to worry about that. Okay, what are the revisions, and try to put a little bit more focus on that instead of trying to pick apart the whole entire document.
Sure, so the dates can be whatever you want them to be, it's up to you.
Okay.
We can certainly provide something that gives more of a guideline of what changed from the old ordinance to the new ordinance. Give you some references.
That would be helpful, 'cause that's what I've struggled with going through the whole thing.
I think that the most important thing is that this board is comfortable with the draft before it goes to public hearing. Because if you get to the public hearing and you decide that you want changes, you're gonna have another public hearing.
Right.
You don't wanna, you can, but it's sort of a waste of time.
That's polite.
If I might add, was when Danielle and I sat down, then we met with Liz. I would say that my takeaway from this was two things. There were a lot of footnote references in the original documents that didn't have anything you could correspond them to.
Right.
Liz fixed all of those and put the correct references in for them. The other thing that I noticed as we went through it, they took some of the language that had zoning classifications, like I think it was R1 and R2, and combined them because there's so few here. And so they kind of streamlined and simplified some of the other zonings because we're mostly REF. Okay, and then they cleaned up the process where over the years, from different codifications that had taken place, a lot of the references either disappeared or weren't footnoted correctly, and she kind of cleaned all of that up, and that's really what started the project when Danielle was looking at it. She said, I can't find where these things are, and I can't remember. So so it started to clean it up to make it easier to use, and I think it is simpler now. Danielle said she was pretty comfortable with it, so if that provides some comfort to you, she's the lady that's got to do it day in and day out.
Angela, just to let you know that basically there's not much that was changed. And our old chapter 54 is just going to be gone. So we would never have to refer back to that ever.
Okay.
So it's probably just best that you learn from this now new clean slate.
Yeah,
And to know,
I just don't want to pick apart something that was in the original, which doesn't, I don't want to do that. What I want to do is just focus on moving forward and based on what the intent was in terms of why you wanted to revise it in the first place. It sounds like for clarification purposes, and make it cleaner. I want to focus on those type of revisions and say, okay,
so you want to know exactly what they changed.
yeah, or at least a synopsis, like on a, either a synopsis, like a front page synopsis of here's the spirit of the revisions. And then in the document itself, and again, it's hindsight, right? I mean, we could go through it today and I'll be fine. Someone could just flag out if I ask something that's as long as I know that's in the original, then I'm gonna back away. But what would have been nice was the highlighted areas of here's the section that we revised with a note saying, revision to clean up a footnote or something along those lines. That way it would have been at least easier for someone like me that's not acquainted with the original ordinance to go through and just focus on those areas.
I wouldn't feel bad that you might not know the original one because it's been so long since I had looked at it. When I sat with them, and I was making comments like, why do we have all this stuff about dirty bookstores in here? I mean, it's a great several pages on all this stuff, So, but we just lifted that right out of what you guys did when you adopted it, because that was a number of years ago where we did it to stop them from, if you remember,
Right.
when Brandon had one, we didn't want them all over the place here. So a lot of that language that's in there, she's just, if it seems kind of alien now, it's probably because it was already in there. She just really kind of cleaned up the whole
Yeah.
process and streamlined it.
And I would echo exactly what Angela said, though, being a newer commission member, I guess knowing what was modified would be exceedingly helpful and maybe ultimately a time-saving measure because we're not wasting dialogue on
Yeah,
and, substantive provisions that are time tested and well accepted within the township community.
and I would even say that would be helpful for the public hearing too. That way the public understands that, here's the intent, here's the revisions, and then that way they're focused on, okay, yeah, for the most part, the original ordinance is retained, but here's some of the cleanup, and it may make the public hearing a little easier too.
So I guess that leads me back to a simpler question. How were the substantive changes? Well, I guess the first question would be, were there any substantive changes? Or are we talking simply a non-substantive revision of the prior ordinance?
I think the biggest changes are your changes to your zoning districts. So, for example, Bob alluded to it, but you had two zoning or residential zoning districts that we combined into one. So I would consider that to be a substantive change. You're changing the numbers, and also the names of the districts, which, is doesn't really change how they're regulated, but when you're referencing them, that is a bigger change. So I think it might be helpful for your review in the public hearing to maybe have maybe a page or two list of some of those bigger changes like that. But not necessarily, but correct me if I'm wrong, not necessarily like we changed the word
No,
from this to
no. That's
Yeah, I think that's,
Substantial changes that besides, we didn't change any numbers or direction
No, it was,
or anything that.
you just cleaned up all the blank spots that Danielle couldn't find the references to that had gotten misplaced over the years, and then a couple of the zoning changes.
It was
It's really,
made to be readable.
Okay,
Not-
so
Nothing, no content change.
Right, so
But- but-
setbacks.
it's not like the
size,
township used to have R1A zoning and most of it in its first zoning plan. And they went through the whole township and rezoned all those agricultural parcels that they had to in the R1A, and they went through the whole township quarter by quarter. That was a monumental change when we got in our first master plan. There's nothing like that in this one, though. This is all kind of, for lack of a better phrase, yeah, household cleanup. And
Well, and-
streamlining.
Sorry to interrupt you. One more, I guess, change is you had, like, in your current ordinance, you had, your district and then what uses are permitted and what is their
Yeah.
special use. In this ordinance, we updated the terms of those uses, so instead of like having things listed out, like beauty parlor and, salon or barber shop, all those sort of personal care
use.
are sort of lumped into one.
Okay,
So that's the sort of change. And then those are then organized in tables by district, so it's just easier to use.
so the sections pertaining to like solar panels, for example, and the windmills, were those in the original ordinance or are those additions?
They were in there, but language has been updated with the state law
Okay,
changes.
okay,
The other thing is definitions. A lot of the same words are there, but definitions have been updated to be more, because I think you're at last ordinance. Last. Updated. So terms have been updated.
so I guess just as a cumulative, I don't know, a request from the commission at large here to provide us with the, I term them substantive changes. That's not an onerous undertaking. Okay, all right, good. That, I think that would be appreciated. I don't know if that requires a vote or not, but it seems like that's
Spending more money, so yeah.
it would, okay.
so just to add like a one
Synopsis.
page or a synopsis or kind of an executive summary that captures the spirit of the revisions of the documents. Well, if you want to make a motion for something like that, or We can do that.
Well, personally, I agree with you. I think it would be beneficial, especially for the public hearing.
Yeah, because I think it'd make it easier, so.
It gives you
More
some
rehashing.
benchmark for change.
What's changed, right?
Right,
Correct.
keep some
So-
focus.
I don't know. I guess I would go at your command, Danielle, on whether we would entertain a motion for that.
If you're gonna spend more, have them do something else to spend more money, we would have to do it now and approved by the board.
Oh, well, I don't know if you have to go to the board. This is all part of the redone project. In fact, we still haven't used all the money.
Right.
Yeah, you don't have to go, you don't have to go back to the board. It's just drag this out for.
Yeah.
We're good to go.
You're
So,
good.
but do we still need to do a motion?
You can, if you want to just be on record as saying we want something to use for the public hearing to make it easier to understand.
Would
I'll make the motion.
please do.
I'll make the motion for, Beckett and Reader to create a one-page synopsis or executive summary, which captures the spirit of the revisions, and includes, a listing or a summary of the more, the major revisions, to the zoning ordinance document. That's good.
It's all pretty
You
encompassing.
may wanna.
And maybe the stuff that you threw out that didn't have any meaning, that you threw out stuff that did not
Yeah.
have any reference anywhere.
Yeah.
So that if somebody's, well, there was a lot of stuff that was nothing. And thank you for going through all that crap.
Second.
I think that should be pretty straightforward.
Any further discussion on the motion as presented? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay, motion approved. Thank you.
Except the one on the sales for 118 pages.
Well, we're still gonna get there,
Yeah.
Mr. De Palma, because the way I had kind of envisioned how we would go through this, if there's no further discussion on the timeline, I guess my question to you, Liz or Kyle, obviously you folks have done this before. I'm sure you've guided townships maybe through some ordinance consultation. As far as these dates and, laying them out, Danielle, do you see any difficulty with having the public hearing or having this ready to go for public hearing next month?
Like the first,
Second time,
Yeah, because I think there was what,
Thanksgiving week.
15 days.
Lunch should be here.
On reform.
because it looks like it's gotta be in the newspaper 15 days prior to the hearing, correct?
And there's an attorney review here. How long is that gonna take?
He's already done.
Okay,
Okay.
so he's.
Will came through for us. We
Yeah.
sent it from the other day.
Thank you. Yeah, that excellent point. So that's been accomplished. Maybe we can just kind of table that thought regarding the timeline until after we're through with tonight's discussion. And maybe we'll get a sense of, how cumbersome it might be to stay on that schedule. Would that sound okay?
Yep.
Okay. So as far as, I guess, the review of the Groveland Township zoning ordinance, this is the draft of the proposed revision. I just had, I guess, some general questions to start with. And one of them was kind of touched upon, and that is documents that are incorporated into the ordinance. Is there a legend or some key of tables, links, anything that, I guess, in a summary format kind of lists, like, I don't know, like I want to say a bibliography, but
Table of contents.
not so much a table of contents. That's one of my other questions, though. Would that be helpful?
It's more of a reference.
But it's more of a schedule of, right, incorporated documents. Because there seem to be quite a few.
There currently isn't, but we can certainly add
Oh, there's not.
that. Well, there isn't a list of incorporated documents, but we can add one at the beginning. And
Okay,
to your question about a table of contents, there will certainly be one. We just usually add at the end so that we don't do it.
Perfect.
Yeah, because then you have to edit the table of contents and the page number if you have to add something or take away something.
And then, just on that topic, you'll see throughout the document that there are, that you highlighted or references, like if you're in Article 1, for example, and there's a reference to Article 5. There'll be, if you, once the document is finalized, if you click on that Article 5 in the document, it'll take you to that section.
Well, that's nice, because I was trying to.
Yeah.
Like, no,
Again, if in case there are changes, you know.
Okay. I guess just a curiosity, the definitions, I'm, legally trained. And usually the definitions, especially in like a statutory, a codified form, are at the beginning of the law. And then this proposed ordinance, the definitions are at the end. Is that common, or is that how it was?
No, that's just how we have typically organized ordinances, but there's no reason we can move it, that article to the top if that's.
So it's, I guess, taking your answer at face value, it's just, that's kind of how it's always been done. Put the definitions at the end.
Yes.
So is there, I guess then the next question would be, is there a benefit? Does anyone see a benefit to putting them to the front?
I'd rather have them at the back.
I'd rather have them in the front because I'm with him. I'm used to
Yeah.
just my background reviewing trademark agreements and legal documents are always.
I just want to
That's the
interject
first thing.
really quick here. So this is not going to be a document that we per se have here in our office. It's Unicode
Okay.
online. You can search whatever word you want and it'll come up in every order that you can possibly think of. If you want to search references, if you want to search violations, if you want to search
You can just
enforcement,
put
it
in the
will come up
keyword.
in every single zone that we have that we're listed in. So it's not a document that we will continually be looking to, oh, I gotta look for chapter 54, zone, blah, blah, it's on the computer. So this isn't like a document that you guys will ever have to print and look at, all on the computer.
And I appreciate that. It's just for, I don't know, it seems, it's just, my subjective experience. The definitions always seem to go at the beginning. But if everyone's good with where they're at, Article 14 is fine.
It's not a big deal.
It's
for
not a
me.
big
It just
deal.
was strange for me too. It's all.
Correct. Let's see. Okay, I guess with regard, I'm through Article 1. I really don't have any specific questions on Article 1. Anybody? Questions or concerns on Article 1? No?
No.
Article 2. There's a conflicts provision. Let me see here.
Page 3.
Page 2. Conflicting regulations. What about? Is there any wisdom to addressing conflicting contractual obligations? And I don't, does that exist? I don't know. But I know a lot of times there can be private contract requirements that might bump up against, local ordinance. I'm assuming the ordinance would govern, but is that always the case? And is that anything that was mentioned by the attorney as a concern with regard to, private or even public contracts that conflict with the terms of the ordinance?
I didn't see any comments from the attorney on that subject. My initial thought is reference of the private contract. The township doesn't have jurisdiction over a private contract, so it probably doesn't make sense to put it in the zoning.
Okay. And wonderful. And some of the things that I express may seem silly or stupid or ill-informed, and I apologize in advance. But this is just what I'm thinking through when I'm reading this. So I'll accept that answer if there's no concern, especially on Bob's part. I defer. I guess just another observation in Article 2, page 5. Swimming pools. There's no demarcation, or maybe there is in the definitions, between an in-ground and an above-ground swimming pool. And I know a lot of the spirit of the ordinance here goes to fencing and, safety barriers for children. But there's no definitional, recognition for an above ground versus an in-ground pool. Obviously, if somebody has an in-ground pool, you would think a fence would be needed,
It is required.
correct?
Yeah,
And
and
what-
ground pools, they have a fence around them. Above ground pools, you have to have a ladder that goes up so kids. can
And
just
with
climb.
some locking mechanism so it's not accessible. But,
I'll be honest, I don't know whoever actually checks it because sometimes people put pools in. the don't know
And sometimes they fill them in like Titsworth did. Don, your
So,
former
This doesn't-
supervisor.
but it,
Yeah, doesn't say either or, because you could just buy one at, I don't know, Walmart and inflate it and put water in it. Do I now have to have a 5-foot fence around it?
yes. Yes, so there's a
This
little
doesn't
ambiguity
separate
there
those.
with regard to treatment of in-ground versus above-ground pools.
And
I have a
also
question.
temporary versus permanent, because inflatable would be considered temporary.
You might not be answer to this, are swimming pools addressed in the building?
I believe they are when Jason does them. That's why I said the in-ground ones have a fence around them.
Mhm.
Any ones that I know of. And the above ground ones, like I had one when the kids were small, you had to be able to pull the steps to the ladder. up.
Correct.
So I think in terms of zoning,
Inflated ones, I don't think anybody does anything, because that's usually somebody just doing it for a toddler's pool.
I think in terms of zoning, we would reference the building code for fencing regulations.
Jason does those, doesn't he?
So we can add a letter or a number, I guess.
Yeah, I was gonna say, can we reference that? And then that would clean that up.
Okay. Any other comments, questions, thoughts on Article 2?
I've got a question regarding, renewable energy. There's kind of summary initial paragraph that says for on-site consumption. I don't know how much of the letter of the law, but I do know some people that have installed the system. And it's to kind of stick the energy back into it. So, do we call that on-site consumption? I know I'm splitting hairs with this.
Yeah, I don't know, I don't know how we would actually be able to necessarily notice that, but I think most of those that are that way, the utility company requires them to sell it back into the grid at some rate. And then they're actually buying service back. I don't even think most of those systems can retrocharge your own facility. It's gotta go back into the network and then come off. So a lot of those people that put them in might have a backup generator and a solar panel running electricity back into the utility. At least that's the understanding I was. And I don't know if that's true. We might be doing solar now, the charges of battery.
Yeah, I mean,
I think Kevin's building it.
What's that? I'm sorry, what?
He's got a solar already, he's building in his house. All the batteries he gets from something.
yeah, again, I don't know if it's splitting hairs. I doubt we have anybody off the grid here. So it's probably one we should bring from.
The other, the one thing that I did have in renewable energy was, I know it's kind of specific, or if it says personal. But with this zoning ordinance document, it's supposed to be residential as well as commercial. So I would think the criteria would be somewhat similar, but do we need either a separate section for commercial, or do we need, or are there enough common And I don't know what's in the state laws, but, or the state ordinances as it pertains to solar energy as well as wind. But, is there enough commonality between personal and commercial use where it could be married up into one section? The reason why I say that is and I'm well aware of, there are more and more commercial businesses that are commercial businesses are more likely to install solar power before residential. I'll just tell you that right now, just because of the expense. So to me, I would think it would be extremely important to put in the commercial aspect of it, because if you look at what you're doing with Dixie Highway, for example, and you're bringing in more industrial and more commercial, more businesses.
And once
You're
the
gonna see
tenants
more
for
of
the
that.
industrial park wants to do so.
Yeah, so that's,
But I think that gets covered by, again, by the building inspector when he's doing it, but they're part of the things they pull the permits for and have to comply with. whatever
but they
goes.
do that for the personal use too. So that's what I'm saying, you've got it in your zoning ordinance for personal use, you should have it for commercial too. It's both. Because for a person to do it residential, they've got to pull a building permit too. It's the same thing. So if you're going to reference personal, you really need to put a section in for commercial, because that is the more likelihood that solar is going to get used first. It's in the commercial landscape, and then the personal, the residential will come along later.
But if instead of using the word personal solar installation, we use on-site.
As long as we are well aware that all of these, as it pertains to height, setback, placement, coverage, visibility, and energy, so as long as that all runs parallel together and they're the same, then I would say, yeah, you could just make that more generic, but we may want to make sure that there is not something more, that there aren't more restrictions with commercial.
Look into that, and if not, are people okay with us changing it to on-site solar installations? Because really the intent here is
Yeah.
talking about some sort of renewable energy for one specific site.
Yes.
Right.
And I would do the same for wind energy as well. Because again, the most likelihood is commercial will end up utilizing these type of renewable energy sources first.
Okay, thank you for that, Jim and Angela. I guess moving on to Article 3, just the zoning districts, there is a map. But it's not part of the draft, or was it? Did I miss it?
Yeah, it was in the,
What?
it was in the bundle of documents that Danielle sent over. It's standalone.
Oh,
Document,
okay,
yeah.
okay. Well, if there is one, then that answers my question, because I didn't see it in the
And
material.
I think she's got it where it's highlighted, where it'll be a hyperlink to inside. So once this document's uploaded and finalized, then you can click on it and it'll take you to that. So I remember seeing that someplace. Yep, insert zoning map. So it'll either, correct me if I'm wrong, you're either gonna insert it or you're gonna have some kind of hyperlink that takes you to the zoning map itself.
Exactly, it's just not there right now because it's not finalized
Right.
yet, so. But the draft that we have sent in the packet.
And the districts, you touched upon the difference in the districts. If you could just circle back to that again, since we're on Article 3.
Your REF district is the same. And things that each district has a regulated uses table. One of those terms may have been before, but essentially it's the same. Like church, for example, has been changed to religious institution that encompasses many different religions. So it would be a mosque or a church or whatever. Then the next district is single family residential, that is one that combined R1 and R2. There were very few R2 parcels, and they're essentially the lots, if you look at the current map, are essentially the same size. So it makes sense to combine them into one. Multiple family is the same as multiple homes. When you get to the commercial districts, here's PC, commercial or corridor commercial, going to be sort of your general commercial district. Flexible corridor is the one where you're going to see those changes. It's sort of encompassing your Dixie Highway overlay area, and it's been divided into two. That's why it's flexible. Your innovation tech and Grange Hall. So those are subcategories of flexible corridor. And then your industrial districts are the same. We had originally proposed to combine them into one, so it's for the same reason as the residential districts, but as we talked through it, it made sense to, just for the use purposes, to have them separate. And then finally, your extractive is the same, and recreation.
Yes, Lynn.
On page 16, can you kind of explain that chart?
Oh, yes.
It says adult foster care, 0.5 per bed for maximum parking. I don't, and then the next one down, 1/3 children. One parking spot for if you have 3 children. And I mean, I have tons of pages that are like that, and I just did not understand.
So these are your parking. So you're used to having minimum parking standards. So
Mhm.
that means that if you, let's say whatever the calculation is, whatever the standard is, you're required to have at least 10 spaces. With the new ordinance, we changed it to maximum parking, meaning if the calculations yield 10 spaces, that is the max number that you can have. Most communities have been transitioning to maximum parking to get rid of, expensive parking lots that nobody uses. So for example, the 3 per bed, my page numbers must be different.
It's under rural estate, that farm district. That's the first one. I had a whole bunch of pages like that. And I only need to look at one.
Okay, so 1 per each for family and child care homes. So that is, let's say you have 12 children at this family child care home. The maximum number of parking spaces that you can have on the site is 4.
Right. So the Tracy
can
family that
have-
had 17 kids plus mom and dad 19, they'd really be screwed.
Well, this is for family childcare. This
Right.
isn't necessarily for a resident.
I know,
Yeah. Yeah,
But with maximum parking standards, you could have 0 spaces and you'd be within the law.
Really?
It takes a little while to switch your head around to it.
I'm in that little while phase right now. So what do you mean maximum parking?
So when you have maximum standards, whatever the calculation is, 1 per 3 children, 1 per 3 occupancy, you can't have more parking spaces than that. So if the calculation is that you can only have 4 spaces when you're putting in a new development, and you can only put 4 spaces on there.
I
You
see.
can't put in 25, because maybe one day of the year you might have that many people there. You can only have 4 in the effort to not have those
Vacants.
vacant parks.
Okay.
So you're planning for your average daily use rather than your peak,
Mhm.
for instance. So, if for one time twice per year, that you have a holiday party, and you plan, in the past, you would plan to provide spaces to meet all your needs. For that peak day, and the rest of the time that space is vacant. Now you're planning on what the industry or your use would use on a daily basis rather than.
The peak.
So, so for those, because I recall this in other places, correct me if I'm wrong, so when they would have a special event where they would need, let's say, 25 spots, when they need a special use permit or something like that to be able to. Because I know there's some cities or townships, if there's, let's say, a particular business that has some kind of outing where they know they're gonna bring in like 200 people versus like 25, then they have to seek out a special parking permit, so they have parking for the remaining.
Yeah, that would be something
$170.
like a special event.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Kind of like what we used to do with Nick's Farm when he had his pumpkin fest thing.
yeah, there you go.
Park up 200 cars.
So he would come in and ask
He did
for a
special use
special
permit
permit.
for the
Yeah.
Harvest Festival or whatever he called it.
So for those special ones.
So these ratios you're showing, these are industry standard ratios. I mean, these have been proven to work out in other townships in their ordinance. You know, something like the adult home thing, you know, I don't know how many daily employees are there to, you know, do whatever they do in those places. And how does that relate to the number of beds you have? I don't know how that ties in, so.
Right, the way we figure those out is the American Planning Association has a guidebook for whether you're using minimum standards, maximum standards of years and years of research of what has worked for various uses. So we based on that, and then it also depends on what type of community you are. So it's going to be different if you're a big city versus a township.
And is there any Americans with Disabilities Act requirements in this parking?
There are requirements in the, I believe, let me see, it's article. Article 5 has specific standards for landscaping, parking, lighting, but in 5.3, there are parking requirements that for ADA.
So I just wonder if somebody looked at this chart, would they think, okay, I've got a house with 4 beds, I only need 2 parking spots. Does that conflict with the ADA requirement, or is there an additional spot because of the ADA requirement?
There would likely be an additional spot because of the ADA requirement. In all these tables, there will be a reference to those additional standards.
Okay.
So,
Because I like this, it's like a one-stop shopper, right?
Yes.
You know, and I just want to make sure if I were doing this from scratch, I'd come out with the right count.
Right, yeah, because you don't want to go away with the assumption, right, that includes that spot.
Right.
Generally, when we do the parking house, we just do originally the regular, the standard spots.
Okay,
And then reference that ADA separate, but yeah,
Okay.
that's why we'll add that with references.
Yeah, or at least just a footnote under each table to say, does not include, parking. To meet ADA requirements, please reference article, what did you say, Article 5 or whatever that was.
Yeah, 5.3.
Yeah,
Mhm.
to determine, adequate parking for ADA or something along those lines.
there are currently notes at the end of each table, like at 3.3.5. Those are the parking loading standards for the REF district. There is no additional parking standards located in Article 5. Is that enough?
I would put it right where you start defining, the number of parking spots. To me, that would make more sense.
All right, we'll add it to the end. of all
Yeah.
these.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I would even just put a reference note so the user knows, point blank that this does not incorporate parking that meets ADA requirements. Please reference article and be very specific on that footnote, so they understand that, okay, I gotta reference this 5.3 5.3 or whatever that section is in order to make sure I have the right number of parking. So I'm not. So I'm taking that into the account.
Oh,
And Neil's reference to the ADA made me think of another question, and I'm assuming this is what the attorney was looking for, is just compliance with federal and state law governing, non-discrimination, whether it's Title VII, whether it's Elliott Larson, whether it's the Handicapper Civil Rights Act. That's something that the attorneys, looking for with regard to the provisions. Okay.
Yes, I saw in his review. Here, he just did, right?
Yes.
That he's updated many of the code references, like state law code references. So they're the right numbers.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, thank you. Any other comments on Article 3 or questions? No? Moving to Article 4, which is the overlay districts. I guess my initial question was, we just kind of went through a process of recommending approval for, the township's overlay district to the board. I believe that was done months ago. How would that integrate with the ordinance?
So in PC 4.2, it says the yield link. So that'll directly link to the document that.
That was adopted?
Yes. And so, to make back to your original questions about having a list of appropriate documents that would be one, that would go with that. So
Okay, now, was there an overlay, was there an overlay district article in the prior zoning ordinance?
I do not believe so.
So that's a new article, okay. Any other thoughts, questions, or comments on Article 4? Okay. Article 5, I guess my abiding concern here was just retroactivity or prospective application. How does this ordinance treat existing properties and existing structures and existing land uses? I'm assuming once this is, if it's ultimately approved and passed by the board, becomes part of our muni code. Anything that exists up until adoption would be, quote unquote, grandfathered, or how does that work?
Yes. With the term in the ordinance is legal non-conforming, but yes, anything that existed prior to the adoption of this ordinance is legal grandfathered. So the standards like in Article 5, landscaping, lighting, these would all come into play if somebody is redeveloping or starting a new development, then they would have to come into play.
Okay, makes sense. Just one curiosity, on page 46, there's a section pertaining to irrigation. And it just, I don't know, I guess I was questioning the practicality of requiring that landscaped areas be irrigated. Is that something that was in the former? It was. Oh. Okay.
But if you would like it taken out.
No, I just, as I was reading through this, I guess the level of detail was what impressed me. And there was a lot of things I personally didn't realize until I read this, so it was rather insightful.
I think that the intent is to ensure that anything that's planted is maintained.
Yes.
So you don't just plant some trees and die.
Right.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, concerns regarding Article 5?
The only other thing that I had on Article 5, but it's not important, but maybe something to think about, and I don't want to hold this up, but so I know it talks about landscaping. I know you know, up front, the purpose is stated. You know, you got to promote public health, safety, general welfare, harmonious early development, and then foster civic beauty. I'm just wondering in today's age, if we need to start capturing something along the lines of sustainability or in environmentally friendly or something along those lines. I don't know, just a thought. Because you're kind of doing that with putting in trees and that, you're indirectly impacting the environment and the ecosystem in some way, shape, or form, you know, kind of gets back to sustainability. And I'm just wondering if to bring this more to the times and where we're going, if something like that needs to be included, or at least needs to be captured under those 3 bullets of purpose.
We've certainly done that in other ordinances.
Have you? Do you have maybe examples that you could? I don't know about you guys, but I wouldn't mind having that incorporated, not by giving people details on how to do it, but at least capturing the spirit of it up front.
And Angela, what section are you
Um,
referring to? Article
Right
5?
up front, Article
Right here,
5,
right here.
5.1 under intent and purpose.
Okay, so right, point 1.
So I would even just put in a letter D and have something along the lines of sustainability and contribution to the environment or something along those lines. Sounds like they've done ordinances like that where without telling them what to do, you know, we don't want to get into that. I mean, it's pretty specific already. I would just at least say, hey, in the spirit of it, something to keep in mind.
No,
Do we require it or do we suggest it?
Yeah.
That's
probably-
why I just want it under the purpose.
Yeah,
You see what I'm saying?
I like the idea of
Just
making them
capturing
think
the
about it.
intent.
I don't
Yeah.
know what the solution would be and if we required it.
I wouldn't, that's why I like how this purpose states is it just says, hey, you know,
Intent and
the
purpose.
purpose is to make sure we, you know, first and foremost, public health and safety, promote harmonious. So then as we are reviewing, if there are landscaping, because I think there's times where you would have to review or approve landscaping, especially from a commercial aspect. If we have that in mind as we're looking at it, and we have sustainability in mind as we're looking at it, and it's upfront, we're not dictating to people how to do it, but it just gets everyone to be very mindful as they're working on their plans and as we're reviewing. That's
No,
all.
Angela, I harken back to a lot of the dialogue discussions we had when we pushed through the recommendation for the overlay.
Yeah,
Regarding sustainability and just environmental awareness. I think what you're touching on kind of generally aligns with the township's broad view
yeah,
regarding, you know, future development and land use.
Yeah.
So I think that's a prudent idea.
so if you have language that you have examples of that could get plugged in, if we can see that, that'd be great.
Good point.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So the question regarding, so would the reflection be this something to do with sustainability as it relates to erosion and potentially site water management? Those are.
I mean, it could go into that, which may even go into that section of irrigation, I don't know, but I was just thinking when I was reading this, because it goes into a lot of details about, you know, trees and, you know, it kind of gets into specifics on landscaping, which I'm not sure if I agree with to begin with, but if that's what was originally in 54, I'm not gonna argue that. All I'm saying is, you know, as we're going through and and folks are coming in with landscape plans, and maybe it's in other areas too, maybe it's in irrigation, that we're looking at that, we're taking that into account, whether it's erosion or the type of plants or trees that are being used, you know, things of that nature, where we can at least have, without being dictators and dictating to them what they need, at least be able to give them some advisement in terms of, you know, maybe it's into species of trees or maybe we're lacking some species of trees in certain areas. I don't know. Without just at least having it in the forefront and having it at least in the spirit within the purpose, then it kind of gives everyone.
Personally, I think it's a laudable consideration. I don't see it like sufficiently touched upon in, you know, subparts A, B, and C. So I think it would be a worthy add to the intent and purpose under Article 5.
And who knows, maybe later on down the road when, as we learn more, we may want to put more definition behind that, you know, whenever it's time to revise this again. I don't know, but at least capture the spirit of it.
Good. Okay, moving on to Article 6. I didn't
Ask
have
Tim.
any questions. or
Page
concerns.
85, ask Tim. I want to know about that. It's 6.25 and it's Harry the horse. It's 6.5 and it's Harry the horse. It's Harry H runoff. Ask Tim for how to I'm just like, why would that be there?
That's a note to ask the engineer if he wants any additional standards for runoff in junkyards.
Okay.
Where do you see Harry the horse?
I'm a math teacher. H stands for horse.
Oh, my goodness. Okay.
Oh, come on. You know, 2H plus 7 equals
Okay, I
85.
missed that.
I'm sorry, every letter has.
I
a
thought
word.
there was Harry the horse.
No, nice. I apologize. I'm sorry.
Really? Was this carried over from the original ordinance?
I'm sorry.
Used to be 2 pigs.
And Liz or Kyle, just the comments out in the right-hand margin, what those were, I mean, just some explanation as to the significance of those.
Those are just some of the final remaining little things that need to be addressed, like. There's one of the comments is that the attorney needs to be that code reference.
So some of these were authored by council. These are the comments of the attorney.
They're either by me or the attorney.
Understood.
The
But for-
area.
For 6.5 H. I imagine it will say one of needs to meet the engineering standards.
Do we need anything special? Because I know 6.5, you talk about automobile certifications,
For you.
which I assume it looks like fueling. Do we need anything special as it pertains to charging stations?
I've never seen anything for that other than whatever the, state electric does those. He's familiar with all the codes for it, but I don't think I've seen anything different for it. Are you asking, does it require something like a fueling station at the fire station for diesel fuel? It's got to be under a covered roof with a retention wall around it for spills and that. I don't think there's anything like that for the electric ones.
You may want to find out.
They just pull a permit.
Yeah.
Jason and Mike does it,
Mhm.
electrical.
Because there's no spillage kind of issue, which is what there could be with regular fuel. That's why we have those retaining walls, but there's nothing I've seen on that. We put them in that state where you put 5 or 6 of them in the front, just did the correct kind of, conduit or electrical connections.
There are standards in Article 5 for electric vehicle
Charging.
5.3.3.
Okay. For personal use, right? Residential.
No, in commercial
Okay,
sites. So
okay.
it says that they're permitted in any zone when they're accessory to a primary permitted use. There's a list of standards, but basically that the township encourages them.
Yeah, I'm just sensitive to that right now, because that's the industry I've been working in, and I think there's a lot more to it than what the local level's been taking into account in terms of safety and stuff. So I think there's gonna be more to come in terms of regulations and things of that nature. So if there's nothing right now, I mean, I would double check. I know based on some of the work I've seen, there's gonna be a lot more coming, a lot more.
We're talking about codes that would apply as to how they're hooked up. Or
How they're even used and the spacing and everything. It's,
That won't be in our ordinance, though, that'll be up to our electrical inspector to be updated on. That won't be listed in our ordinance, it might say some. They just won't.
but I mean, if that's the case, then why are you listing it for service stations in terms of the spacing of fuel pumps? Because that would be captured.
That's fuel, this is electric, there's no standards to it, like there would be gas.
There's standards for spacing of fuel. Yeah,
For
absolutely.
fuel, yeah, fuel,
Right.
but is there anything for EV? There is on page
Yeah.
8. You look at page.
There should be, and that's why I was asking.
So if you want to look at what is on page 58.
Here, here.
There are,
Okay.
things that
Perfect.
you think should be added.
It won't be 50 or 56 for you.
Yeah, why do I have a different?
Mine was just run off today. So yours should be 56.
Okay. I mean, it's good for now. I'll just give you a heads up. It's
No,
gonna-
no, one more page on that.
Equivalent of a gas station.
Here.
Don't worry about it.
There's that, but it's not just that, but when you, and especially if it gets down the road where you get more commercial charging with more of your commercial vehicles, there's a lot more involved because it's higher voltage. So, and even with personal stuff, when it comes to safety and that, they're finding out some things after the fact, after they've had some incidents, so there could be some changes even as it pertains to personal use. But it's just something to be aware of. I think it's fine the way it's written right here. But we may have to in the future go back and make revisions as more comes out.
Dwayne's a big installer of those here, so.
He's
Next time
probably
he's
gonna
in,
be on
we'll-
top of
Yeah,
it.
so next time he's in, we'll ask him what he.
Yeah.
what he's in for.
Yeah.
Okay,
Can I ask about a stupid thing in Article 5? And mine's on page 57. It talks about calculating maximum parking space, but it's talking about seat space for a person.
I will.
It says calculating,
hang on.
Let's see.
This is page 57. Where'd you drive? What?
57, I apologize. Oh, this is McCoot. 535.
Loading. Yeah, loading zones, 5.3.5.
This is McCoot.
Is it number 3?
Number 3, under D, dog. Sorry,
So
it's always dumb dog, Dominique.
are you wondering what that?
Yeah, I know it's for size, but I'm looking at the 25 square feet per floor per seat.
So sometimes the, usually it looks like some sort of assembly use, like a church. Often your parking requirements would be based on number of. how many
Oh.
seats there are.
Okay, so by the capacity of this church, you're parking. Okay, Duncan, thank you. This is weird.
Okay. I guess continuing under Article 6 with seasonal outdoor activities. Now, there were a number of highlighted areas in from this section, and I'm looking at, this is 6.37.
The highlighted is for section 26, that that is just a highlight for us. That's a reference to your police power ordinance about seasonal outdoor festivals. Just so that it's linked. And all the language is coming straight from the order.
The original,
Okay,
yeah.
I follow you.
So
Okay.
there really wasn't any changes to Article 6 overall, correct?
I mean, the number is different, but these are all standards for uses that require special use.
Okay.
Yeah, base all of them on your threshold. A few of them. Maybe. Examples.
Like you've got one for 6.25 regarding runoff, ask him for how to mitigate. Looks like that needs to be.
Right, so that would be something that.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions on Article 6?
The Renaissance.
I think we need a whole new document just for them.
Well, that's a good point.
From 96 to
it's-
100.
Right?
I think we were anticipating some feedback from this year's event, statistical information. Well, just how would what we learned from 2022's festival, if we take anything away from it, how would that carve into the ordinance if it's significant enough?
I think more what carves into it, because it's a unique situation, is the fact that we've learned we cannot expect the Renaissance Festival to comply with the same understanding that we had on the requirements. This year's festival, the last 3 weekends was a disaster. The last weekend, both days, the parking lot was filled by 2:30. Somehow the meeting I had with the state police lieutenant and the trucking company that runs the towing service completely got left out of telling the afternoon shift at the MSP post. And that's why the sergeant on the afternoon shift sent the tow trucks away. Trying to get a hold of the detachment commander at home on Sunday and tell him to make sure he didn't do it again. The problem seems to be this. I think everything that, if I were to summarize what I think happened, everything that we did that was implemented was either not implemented the way we thought it should have been or would have been, and I'll give you an example, or the capacity of the festival just blew right past everything we had done. And so I think those two things together made it completely unworkable. They clearly exceeded the capacity of the festival beyond whatever they could have expected, because the parking lot on weekend 7, both days, was filled by 2:30 or 3 o'clock. By not understanding the rules, I thought all of us had a clear understanding that when the traffic backed up to the 2-mile marker on each side,
Closed.
they would close the gate and wave the traffic on by. That never happened. They finally would close it when the parking lot was full and nobody waved any traffic by. So I have to assume when we finally get back to the Oakland County Sheriff, he'll say, well, they told us to just keep them there until we could let them in, which is why the traffic backed up in some cases 4 or 5 miles in each direction. So it was completely untenable. And the other thing that I think we would have to specify in great details exactly what the messages are that they will put out on that application they developed or on the signs on Dixie Highway. It can't just say festivals full, sorry for the inconvenience, because that's code for park wherever the hell you think you can get away with it. Okay. It needs to say festivals full, there will be no admittance at this time. And I think there needs to be a couple of large signs added right at the entry to the festival that light up that say festivals full today, no new admittance. And I think he's apprehensive to, he being the owner, is apprehensive to do that. I know a lot of people think it's Kathy that's inept down here, and maybe she is some part of it, but I honestly think the bulk of the problem is Jim Peterson.
I just out of curiosity, has the historical experience the township's experience with the festival ever yielded a revision of the ordinance?
No, not the ordinance.
So the
What-
ordinance-
What happened there's been at least 2 times where we had major failures. Been a lot of them, in fact, major ones, and that's what prompted them to get the second parking lot, the south parking lot. That was their effort initially in saying, and we got more people than we need. But the problem is now they have no place else to put them.
But as far as the ordinance and our, the commission, the township board's ability to dictate the terms of the special use,
We've
the
never
ordinance is
changed.
sufficient for that purpose,
Well,
correct?
I think it is because Will has said several times to me in calls recently, the problem about it is that we actually just have the parking lot, the front of the parking lot.
Right.
We're kind of stretching it to impact the driving because it's such a problem, which is why
That's why I think,
Fishbeck is trying to get to the road commission.
that's why I think the county needs to get involved. I mean,
They
that's
should-
what
they
it
should be.
boils down to.
And-
Now,
And
Maybe
most of
we're-
the times they are.
I mean, we may be straying into a different discussion here. And thank you for, your comments on, what you've learned since things wrapped for the 2022 event. But as far as tonight's discussion and the sufficiency of the ordinance as proposed, is there any concern with regard to our ability to dictate the terms going forward?
Well, my concern, we're dictating with this ordinance. They're not following it and there's no repercussion.
And that is the gist of the problem, which is why Will has said.
But you
We-
can't
we tell them-
I
Sure.
don't know if that's necessarily true, reading what's in here. I
Well,
mean, I think if you review what's in here, I would say, yeah, they followed it. So I
Well,
think if
there's-
anything, getting back to your point, we need to revise this. So, based on lessons learned from them, to put a little bit more meat behind this. So
I
at
think it's
least
some
we are
both.
covered.
We need to, in great minutia and detail, specify exactly what we mean happens when we say something.
Yeah.
We
Right.
might have to modify the ordinance, but I think it would be a little bit premature to do it because if Oakland County actually steps up to it like they should, according to Fishback, it says, we'll tell them when they're meeting the traffic conditions or not, and if they don't, we'll block their driveway. We may have fixed that problem.
Love that idea.
If they say, no, we can't do it, you'll have to do it, we might have to put language in there that says, we won't tolerate more than a 2-mile backup, at which time we will block it with a fire engine or something. I don't know. It could be that, I don't know, but
And here's
most of
just,
these special uses all have some permutation of something that's kind of unique and different from everything else. That's part of the reason it falls into a special use permit. And so what's happened with the festival is out of necessity, we've done it. And I think in their heart, they must know this is a mess and they're not asking unreasonable stuff. The problem is you saw from last year, they become experts at dragging it out to the nth degree, putting something in the 11th hour, 59th minute, 59th second, and then not quite understanding it the way all of us did. Kathy actually told me at the beginning that she said the agreement was only if we blocked all 4 lanes going north and south, we'd be closing. And I said, I don't know.
Are you serious?
And she said, you said it in a meeting. I said,
No.
well, I tell you what, Kathy, all that stuff sounds
And so
good. You
the
tell me
question
what
is,
meeting
what's
it
it-
is.
what's
I'll
in
pull it
writing?
up, 'cause I'd like to hear it.
just reading through this as I'm sitting here, again, it talks about, it has to promote public health, safety, welfare.
Yeah, so
We
it's a
had 5
generic blanket.
accidents on one day from people doing U-turns. We've got people walking up and down Dixie Highway at 7 o'clock at night, getting back to their cars in the dark with no lighting, with no barriers. And it says, if there's any, foot traffic, it's got to be, marked off and lit. It says that the parking crews are supposed to be professionals. One day they had, the parking crew
showed up.
doesn't show up. To my point, they're not meeting the requirements and there's no repercussions. They do whatever they want. It turns bad and they just come back
And
next
it's
year.
Then how come we're not revoking their permit? when
Because
we-
I think the reality is if we revoke the permit, remember, we only have the permit for the front part of the parking.
Right,
If we revoke that permit, I don't think there's a snowball's chance in hell he's not gonna open. The only way we're going to get there, and this is the discussion I had with Will before they actually opened and subsequently since then. He said, we're going to have to go to circuit court. no matter what happens.
Oh,
We
yeah.
have to go to circuit court, even if they agree to everything, like a consent decree on a mining company. We have to go to a circuit court so that there's the validation of a judge making an order.
So
And
it's
then I
not-
think we have the ability to do it. Because I honestly think if we said, well, we're not issuing you a permit next year, I think the Holly maybe would go ahead and give them their permit. And then they would just be doing it anyway. And they'd say, well, what the hell are you? I'm not asking you. We're just driving through Groveland Township.
Yes,
Yeah, but
Jim.
it may affect you folks too. When you read through section 8.2, and then it refers to, in my opinion, section 12.4, excuse me, 12.3. We could have, if it doesn't turn out to be too difficult to enforce, we can have a performance grant.
performance, what, I'm sorry?
A performance grant
Well,
on something.
Kind of asked Will about some of that. I said, you know, at Pine Knob, they have a stop time for the music. I think it's
Yeah.
11:30. And if you play after 11:30, they charge you $10,000 a minute. And some of the
Fine.
rock groups have said, yeah, we're good for 20 minutes, rock on, you know?
Yeah,
And I said, can't we do something like that? Put a penalty in here. And he said, well, those charges are supposed to be what you charge because you have to do something to mitigate the problem. So if you said, well, if you're, this doesn't work, but let's say their traffic is bad, I have to call up 50 troopers. Well, the Michigan State Police, and that costs $500,000. You can put a $500,000 fine on it, but it's for paying for those troopers to come in and fix it. So while I would love to nail them for something like that, I don't think Will feels there's actually a
But I
high.
I
High
don't agree with
opportunity.
him because your Pine Knob example, and I know folks that live a half a mile from Pine Knob. And I'm well aware of that. Yeah, you get fined if you go over a certain time.
Mhm.
There's no mitigation. That money doesn't go for soundproofing or landscaping to mitigate. It doesn't go towards any of that.
If you're right, I hope you're right, because I've asked Will, I want something that we can get money out of.
So-
I said, for one,
I don't.
I'm not
understand.
supposed to be spending 3 or 4 weekends sitting out at the Renaissance Festival 4 times a day, looking at people all pissed off.
I think as a general proposition, though, the law, the courts will enforce something that's, a liquidated damages provision as
Right,
opposed to a penalty,
yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so that's where
Will's
that's
saying. I
where
think
you
that's-
get into, if you can justify the added expense and quantify that and incorporate that into a contract.
That's why I think he's afraid that part of
I
this is,
see.
remember, we actually only issue the permit for parking on their property. The problem that creates really is still in question as to who's supposed to do it, which is why Fishbeck has been saying for some time. Normally, this is all done by the road commission. They will come up with a plan and say, here's how many cars you can move. When you don't do it that way, they'll send a truck there and block the driveway.
We're shut down.
Yeah.
Well,
So I mean, it might be right, because I would love to be able to say, hey,
Yeah.
you're past 2 miles, you owe me 10 grand now. And if you don't get it out here in 10 minutes, you owe me another 10 grand.
So I'm a big proponent of the cash bond for them to go forward. And this.
And that might be a possibility. We put terms and conditions and we might be able to say on that, you're going to hire a professional parking company if you don't. But again, the reality of it is when they don't hire the right parking company, it manifests itself that day. It was like some people were saying, oh, they were parking in the hunting parking lots on Perryville Road. I said, yeah, but what do you want me to go down there and tow them away or pull them out of there? All I'm going to do is magnify the problem we already got right now.
Yeah,
I can't fix it in the middle of it happening.
I do like the idea of the penalty.
If we can, I'm all for it, and we'll talk about it again when we find out what it is, but I'm just, the preliminary discussion with Will was, it's mostly for trying to get some kind of remediation. If we said, you're going to have to also hire a dozen state troopers, and that's gonna cost you $150,000, we could probably do that and charge them money.
Do you two affected and Raider have any anecdotal information regarding this?
All I would say is that Article 12 in this current, in your new ordinance, anything that violates what's written in the zoning ordinance.
so it's in there.
But it's like, what, $500?
Right. You could make it higher.
Yeah.
Or, and if we can, when we get done, I'm all for, literally, I think what they did this past year was jerk us around to the very end, make a bunch of commitments that we all thought we understood quite well, and they just disregarded it completely. So I'm all for saying, I would say we need to just.
And if we make
Yeah,
agreements
crucify them if
next
they do
year
that again.
and they do the same thing, what's their penalty?
Right.
You
And the
know,
big answer to that would be the judge. I guess to some extent it depends who the
Then
judge is, but
that's where we start.
I really don't think a judge will just say, it's a couple of weekends, you just have to live with it. I just don't think a judge will say that.
I'm just wondering if you're running down the, and I like what she said, there is a penalty. I would even say, take that $500 statement out of there and make it more generic and just say, will be determined.
As determined.
Right, and then if you find out from the attorney, well, what's your what's the maximum? That way we at least have that in mind. Or we could even put that up to a maximum of X. That way we've got the leeway to,
You can rest assured in the meetings that follow, I will be asking that at
Yeah.
every meeting. What can I nail them for?
so maybe for right now, as an edit to this, we just strike the dollar amount and just say.
Would
we'll
you say it's maybe
determine
determined by the planning?
on a
commission?
case by case
Sure.
basis.
Yeah.
Yes,
I like, can we do that?
We can, a penalty also would apply to someone who puts their fence up.
that's why I would
Well,
say.
it's
keep
case
it
by
generic.
case basis,
It's
yeah.
case by case, right?
And we have a past history of $500 being.
Yeah.
Something that we charge for.
But probably the planning commission wouldn't necessarily be the body dealing with fence violations.
No, it would
So
be
I
the
would say
board.
No, they end up being, yeah, that's when Jason goes out and says he put a fence up where you can't either take it down or I got a rated violation. And then usually fixes it. On something like this, it will probably have to, do we need language in there? Or can we put language in there now that would say special use permits may require a surety bond or cash surety?
I would
No.
say cash bond only.
Yeah, that's what I
Yeah.
meant, cash surety. Yeah, I don't want to bond because they work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Want us to hold the cash.
Yeah.
yes. we can.
They haven't paid all their bills to us yet.
And what I would do too is, and I know you said, yeah, we don't have much power because we only have that front part of the parking. But I think what I would do in conjunction with the road commission doing their work, they get involved in parallel. I would just tell them point blank, oh, by the way, you're not getting a permit from us next year. We're done. 3 strikes are out. You're not getting a permit this year. And then if the road commission comes back and says, all right, based on this flow, you're gonna shut down. They're limited on parking spaces by not having that front parking area. You're putting them in a pickle. So I think you
I
may
just-
have some leverage
I-
there. if you do something like
I,
that.
I understand what you're saying, believe me, I would love to find a way to put a big tooth in this, and Will's insistent that the only way to do that is with a circuit judge, because anything else I think we say, I'm telling you, we're gonna say it, he's not gonna do it. We calculated the attendance on a $25,000 day, the tickets are worth about $670,000 or $80,000. I'm betting for $680,000, if you told me I couldn't park there, I'd say, okay, I'll see you in court, because it ain't gonna cost me $680,000, right? And I can hire a really good lawyer to jerk you around for a few months for probably 50 grand, right? That's the reality of it. The numbers are so big. That's why I think Kathy actually told him, when you close the gate, you got to get the cars around. And I think it was Jim Peterson that said, no, I wouldn't want that. Just let them come in. Because he said something to me when he met me at River Rock, and it didn't dawn on me right away. And I thought, is that the sucker that let them come in? And I think that's what happened.
Well, again, I'm getting a sense this is a discussion that will be continued on another
Yeah.
day.
But at least we got a couple
Correct.
edits to maybe help get us in the right direction.
What,
Wonderful.
tell them about when we fought, and I think it was Stable X that wanted to put the dump. And we went to the wrong judge, and he says, well, I don't care, I'll be dead. We got it, and then we had to have a new millage. Pardon?
That was Judge Beers. He was a monogamist, had 2 families. He finally got taken off.
I know, but he said, I don't care, I'll be dead.
So-
And we had to have another millage. We did vote in that millage, and we fought him and we won. We went to another judge.
Yes, but again, I'll tell you, Tom Plunkett's comment to me was, I wish I could say it was great lawyering, but we were lucky.
Okay.
So,
But again, you can't base on that going forward based on fearing of what judge you're gonna get.
No, you have to assume you'll get one that will be
Well,
reasonable.
And to me, you've got residents right now that are furious. They thought we were gonna do something. We failed. I mean, quite frankly, in their eyes, we failed. So by taking it to the next legal step, even if we lose,
You
at
can say, it's
least,
done everything we did.
right.
And that's why I
Right.
said, in
Yeah.
this case, I say in the 27 years I've been here, we have never lost a court case,
Yeah, so,
okay? And on this one, I don't think there's a way for us to lose, because I do believe a judge will look at the information we're putting together and say, this is ridiculous, it has to be fixed, and I'm gonna order this and that.
yeah,
But even if he doesn't and says, if he's like Judge here, well, let him have it just a couple of weekends. You know what? At least when people call, say, don't call me anymore. There's nothing I
I
can do. The
tried.
Judge said it's done. So from my perspective, for Bob personally, there's no losing. Unfortunately, for the people inconvenience there is if we don't get the right judge, but I don't think that's gonna be the case. I think we'll get the right judge.
Okay. Yes, Jim.
I think
I was just gonna add that the Article 12 allows for performance guarantees which will be cash bonds, so it's already in there.
yeah. Right
We
here.
did that a long time ago with some other bond.
12.3 on page, starts on 141.
The BZA has been doing that for years, because the other ones are worthless.
141. My numbers agree with it.
Mhm.
All right, so being devil's advocate, to that language there suggests that somebody could say, well, it can be any of those. Where I would prefer a cash bond where we're holding their money.
That's why I say cashier. That's what it is. We don't take surety bond.
Well,
Take
it
cashier.
says whether credit certified check or surety bond.
I think that the line acceptable to the township is
That gives you your wiggle room.
We
Well,
never
it
take
says
bonds.
Covering the estimated cost of improvements. Or in this case, in my opinion, this is simply punitive, screw up. No.
Well, it's just, I guess, okay,
Well,
well,
there's
it depends. I mean,
The accidents that occur,
you
everything.
would think that the festival would be weird, wouldn't you? We had 5 accidents on one day, all U-turns. This is again, they would probably say in court, well, they're supposed to know U-turn, they're not supposed to do it. What can we do? The problem is when you make that bad of a problem that is congested and backed up and long is what happens at the festival. Human nature is there's going to be people out of those 25 or 30,000 that say, I'm making a U-turn, I don't give a shit. Right? And then they pull out, somebody T-bones them, and then we have to send an ambulance and a fire brigade down there. And for those times, the first time I went down there, the traffic was backed up to the fire station. I said something to Kathy, and then later Kevin got back, he said, yeah, but Bob, that's because we had 5 accidents that day, and when I send them down the road, it blocks the road for about 15 minutes, so we clear the scene. When I came back, it cleared up right away. I thought, okay, so it is working. Back we go.
Yeah, but if you're condoning, enhanced risk of injury and, imperiling the health, safety, welfare of the attendees or the local citizens, that's a foreseeability question. That fuels a legal argument for liability. So I don't know why they're not, concerned about that stuff. But be that as it may, if we could, I guess, move on. I really didn't have any, specific concerns or questions regarding the remaining articles. So I guess just kind of fishing for feedback regarding the remaining articles. Did anyone, I guess, just from a general view, and we're talking, articles 9 through 13.
Pretty much carry over on the remaining articles.
Yes, so Article 7 is about site plan review, they settle here, performance, but reorganized, made the process a little clear. Same with Article 8, which is special land uses. Article 9 is more land development options, so plan unit development and all different ways, but reorganized. And then site condos is based on state law. And then non-conformity is talking about grandfathering
Mhm.
issue, and then PUA is straight from with Article 11 is straight. Article 12 is your administration report. Now, I think maybe for that 12 point, use performance guarantee instead of saying ensure faithful completion of the improvements. It would be the project. This is like we're incorporating the special.
Yeah, I like that. Short number, leave it.
And then 13. This is how to amend the ordinance. And then definition.
Danielle and I will move to show them, we'll get ready to go. Don't have to sit down for this and went through it. It all kind of fell into place pretty quick for us, I thought. She did a good job on it.
Yeah.
We just had to kind of get walked through the big part, but make sure we knew where we were going.
No, and that was kind of the sense I had, Bob, because when I looked at this stack of documents, it's like,
Holy moly.
holy hell, this is a lot to take in, but then there's some, I guess there's some structure to it. There's some,
Danielle.
Thank you.
so I guess just with regard to, yeah, I guess, thank you, Len. Doubling back to the timeline, any concerns, given our discussion tonight with regard to, maintaining these dates?
I mean, November 7th is,
2 weeks.
yeah, I don't think you're gonna hit that because it needs to be in the newspaper 15 days prior to the hearing. So,
That's just the announcement with regard to the scheduling of the public hearing, though, correct?
Yeah, the hearing would be the
Right.
22nd.
okay. Oh, okay, I see. It's just the notice. I'm sorry. I was gonna
Or
say-
be a good day to put
That'd be
stock in a
big.
citizen. The first citizen you get to tell.
Okay.
Well, that on your porch, you'll know it's right.
I mean, what do you guys think? That may be possible, because I think what we suggested today are kind of minor, and then that first page, that synopsis page that we had asked to be provided, right?
Mhm.
And then some minor edits, including maybe getting back to the penalty section in Article 12, kind of wiping out that dollar amount and keeping it more generic,
Depending on the problem.
right?
No, personally, I'm really good actually with this, with the proposed timeline. My questions were answered. With the housekeeping items, I'd call them that. Maybe they're not housekeeping, a little more concerned than that, but I don't see any difficulty with staying on track here. Anybody else?
It puts the burden on Bucket and Raider to make the tune-ups and send us an update. If you're comfortable with it, we can look it over and make sure we got our needs met. And
Have they a copy of the materials a week before, or would you like it earlier?
Now, how do we do that then? Do we need to reconvene for a vote before it goes to public hearing? No, so as long as you send it with the edits and we respond
I
back.
can invite
Okay,
them this week.
okay.
Thursday of this
Well,
week?
We're gonna have the meeting
Oh,
Yeah, yeah,
by Thursday, so I can put a public hearing notice.
yes.
Well,
Please do that, I think.
yeah, is there any reason why we wouldn't?
We should be able to. I don't see why we couldn't. There you go.
I'll send you the new language.
Good point, Jenny.
And that way we can get it knocked out and if we could still.
Okay, so does that conclude the discussion regarding our review of the zoning ordinance draft? Yes? Okay. That actually is the last item of significance on tonight's agenda.
I have a public comment.
Any public comments, Ms. Shank?
Yes. Mr. Bob, would you please tell us about your granddaughter being the student of the month?
Marquee at the school, nice.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
And I
Call her
had,
tonight and remind me.
Oh,
I had to
heard the
call,
girls say, you sound like a good grandpa today. So.
I had to call her father to tell her father, and then I had to tell him, because Brad didn't tell
Tell
him.
me, yes.
And
I told her
she's
reason,
trying, and
and I
tell him
said,
how
call Kayla tonight and tell her, but she forgot.
she's trying to, what, cover it up and say,
Yeah,
oh,
she said, I don't want people to think I'm snooty. I don't know if I got up there, but she broke me up. That's what it is, you know,
congratulations, sir.
very bright young lady.
I do have a public comment too, and that's, everyone's familiar with, Oaks, right?
Yep.
So this coming Saturday from 4 to 6 p.m. If anyone has nieces, nephews, grandkids, kids, bring them up there from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. for the stall entry. So basically, the horse stalls are decorated in different themes,
Oh,
Halloween,
Cool.
and we give out candy. We've got a stall that we're decorating right now with a Wizard of Oz theme. We're gonna be all dressed up, but everyone does these, there's usually, I think it's like 10 stalls that are decorated. And then there's big bins of
I need
candy.
to do a plaque or a proclamation or something for them, because they're 25 years in
Yeah.
business out here.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that's coming up.
yeah.
Patty talked to me about it today.
But yeah, if you know of little ones that would,
Good stuff.
they could dress up and then come in and we give them candy, and then you can vote on the stalls in terms of how you like them, and all of the proceeds go directly to Oaks.
Where are all the horses?
The horses are out in the pasture eating.
Because otherwise you're gonna have candy stalls with something else.
No, No, the horses are out for the evening anyway, so, yeah, the stalls are cleaned out and ready to go, and then we decorate them up.
And the library's doing that in the elementary, because I tutor at the library.
Okay,
And some little kiddies came in for their, their treats, and I'm tutoring Oxford kids all over the place, so whatever.
Okay, there being no other questions, comments, discussion, I would entertain motion to
Adjourn.
adjourn.
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Second,
I will say.
all in favor,
Aye.
opposed?
Aye.
Everybody.
When do you think we're gonna hear back from Fishback?
He had the problem, oh, yes, I'm sorry. He has said that the request will be back for Will and I to look at no later than November 15th. He's
When
probably
when
done.
can we put that on an agenda to start these discussions?
Yeah, I'm guessing it'll be
Jenny's good?
after
Yes,
that.
yes, yes.
I'm sure
You live in Florida?
Will call me.
Not yet,
and
not yet.
I'll-
They usually go in
I'll let you know
December,
what's
the
going
first 2 weeks in December, I
Yeah,
get her
yeah.
dog. And she goes to Florida, she and Gary set up a thing, clean it out. They have somebody check the house every week anyway, but get it ready, and then they go
Part of it's
after
gonna be,
Christmas or
like I
just.
said, he doesn't answer my
How about
texts
that?
or calls.
Please do. Be serious.
You might be dead.
Well, yes, I'm getting my will revised, and she of course goes with,
Jammed up, so
Okay.
I had to wait 25 minutes to
Wonderful.
get out.
of course, she's a lawyer, but
I can't wait.
She didn't-
20 minutes.
oh, yeah. But
It works.
she is an engineer, and she became a lawyer, but if, and she worked for General Motors as an engineer. And if you sued General Motors, she was assigned the cases. Well, she hated it because she hated lawyers. And the reason why, if they were going to postpone it, oh, no, I read it per in court, because they can charge more money.
Personal cell phone.
She hated it. So she went back to General Motors. If you sued General Motors, she assigned the engineer to defend General Motors and do the investigation. But she was way up there. I think she had 16
I got a lot of
engineers
staff
under her.
over this.
She assigned.
Any feedback from Holly?
Oh, yes.
Any feedback from Holly on their?
George, I called because Janelle is doing an excellent job of capturing the voice of Holly, the voice of Groveland, and the Renaissance Festival's Facebook page comments, which are numerous.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And she said they turned off the Renaissance Festival's page when everybody started complaining, but when they posted on Google, they can't turn it off, so she's going to get those today, and I did call George. I texted him this morning and said, if you got any complaints, can I get them? He said, yeah, I'll pull them up and send them to you. I don't, that's sworn in my mailbox.
For them,
It's like tomorrow.
they should have plenty, because like I said,
Oh, his people were complaining.
Groveland Road, it was.
And
absolutely
so the firefighters were saying if we get called for a fire, the volunteer guys. I don't think I can do the same.
In years past, I've been to the Ren Fest just to walk around and thinking, this can't be safe with this many people. That was without the parking lot full. That lot's been full. There've been people walking in, and that's a Holly problem.
I
But
know.
how is that safe?
Well, but you know, I have been their fire chief several times, and when Steve was still here, he would say, I think you're using the wrong NPF code, because there's really no, they have a book that's National Fire Protection, as a book they use. Well, you're having a circus here, how you figure out how many people can fit in, you have a baseball game, there's so many.
Yeah.
There's nothing for a Renaissance festival. You just use some sort of outdoor gathering code they got, and when they calculate that, you take the entire area of the festival.
And use that area.
pull out The area of the buildings here, and they divide that by some square.
We need to subtract the
Something like
wetlands and the
4,000.
parking. I know.
Because if you've gone there, you realize all the people are
Yes.
congealed in the food area.
That-
There might be that
that's-
much area, the rest, that's not where everybody is, because they don't have it spread out.
Right.